Picture this. You spend $2,000 on a brand new e-bike, you baby it for the first few months, and then one random Tuesday in January, the battery just refuses to wake up. No lights, no beeps, nothing. That's not bad luck. And it's definitely not just old age catching up with you. That's almost always something the owner did without even realizing it. Batteries don't just die of natural causes, they die of 1,000 tiny mistakes made in garages and driveways everywhere, quietly, one charge cycle at a time. Today we're covering the 11 biggest ones, and I'd bet you're already guilty of at least a couple. Before we dive in, let's talk about why this even matters so much, because a lot of riders genuinely don't realize how sensitive lithium batteries actually are underneath all that plastic housing. These aren't like the battery in your old flashlight that you can toss around and forget about for a decade. Lithium cells are chemically picky. They hate extreme heat, they hate extreme cold, and they especially hate being left at either end of the charge spectrum for long stretches of time. I have personally killed a battery pack way faster than I should have simply because I didn't know any better back when I first got into this hobby. And trust me, replacing a battery is not a cheap lesson to learn the hard way. It's genuinely one of the most expensive single components on the entire bike, sometimes rivaling the cost of the frame itself depending on the model. The manufacturers don't always make this information obvious either. It's usually buried somewhere in a manual nobody reads past page 2. So a lot of these mistakes get passed down from rider to rider like some kind of unfortunate tradition. Everybody just assumes their habits are fine because nothing exploded yet. And that's really the tricky part about battery damage. It's almost never dramatic in the moment. There's no warning light flashing, no obvious sign anything's wrong. It's just a slow, quiet loss of range and lifespan that sneaks up on you a year or two down the road. Honestly, it's a lot like range anxiety's quieter cousin. You don't notice it while it's happening, you just notice one day that a ride which used to feel effortless now has you eyeing the battery icon a little more nervously than you used to. If you're new here, go ahead and hit subscribe because we cover practical e-bike ownership advice like this as every single week. And honestly, this might be one of the most important videos on the entire channel. Quick disclaimer before we get started, every bike and battery is a little different, so always check your specific manufacturer's guidelines where they conflict with anything general we cover here. This video is meant to give you the broad strokes that apply across almost every brand on the market. Alright, let's get into the 11 mistakes that are quietly wrecking your battery right now, starting with one that happens within minutes of almost every single ride. Number 11, plugging in your charger immediately after a hard, hot ride. This one catches almost everybody off guard because it feels completely intuitive. You just got home, the battery is sitting right there. Why not top it off immediately so you're ready to go again tomorrow? The problem is that after a hard ride, especially in warm weather or up steep hills, your battery cells are already running hot internally, sometimes significantly hotter than the outside case would suggest just by touching it. Charging generates its own heat on top of that existing heat, and lithium cells that get pushed into a hot charge cycle degrade noticeably faster over time than cells that are allowed to cool down first. The fix here is embarrassingly simple, just wait. Give it 20 to 30 minutes minimum before you plug that charger in, maybe use that time to grab a snack, hose the mud off your tires, or just sit there and enjoy the fact that you didn't fall off this time before you actually connect the charger. I know it feels like wasted time when you're excited to charge up for tomorrow's ride, but this single habit alone can meaningfully extend how many charge cycles you actually get out of that pack. Some of the more expensive e-bikes on the market now include built-in temperature sensors that literally won't allow a fast charge until the pack cools down, which honestly tells you everything you need to know about how seriously the engineers take this specific mistake. If your bike doesn't have that kind of protection built in, and most budget and mid-range models genuinely don't, you're essentially the safety system, and that's a responsibility worth taking seriously, given what a replacement pack actually costs. Number 10, storing your battery at 100% charge for the winter. This is probably the single most common mistake in this entire list, and I say that with confidence because I made it myself for years before anyone corrected me. It feels responsible to top off the battery completely before putting the bike away for a few months. Full charge means ready to go, right? Except lithium chemistry does not agree with that logic, even a little bit. Sitting at a full 100% charge for weeks or months puts sustained stress on the cells and accelerates capacity loss in a way that's honestly a little shocking once you see the numbers laid out. Most battery manufacturers actually recommend storing it somewhere around 40 to 60% charge for long-term storage, which is a number that surprises almost every new owner I've ever mentioned it to. It just feels wrong on a gut level to intentionally leave a battery sitting there half empty for months. But the science behind it is pretty consistent across the entire industry, from e-bikes to laptops to electric cars. That middle zone puts the least amount of chemical stress on the cells over an extended period of inactivity. So before you tuck that bike away for winter, do yourself a favor and write it down or manage the charge to land somewhere in that middle zone instead of maxing it out. Your future self, the one unboxing the bike in springtime hoping for a full range ride, will genuinely thank you for this one. Some battery management systems will even let you set a storage mode directly through a companion app, which does the math for you automatically, so it's worth checking your bike's settings menu before you go hunting for a manual charge percentage yourself. Number 9, letting the battery sit completely dead for weeks at a time. On the opposite end of the spectrum from the last mistake, we've got riders who let their battery drain all the way down to zero and then just leave it sitting there in a garage corner, sometimes for months, sometimes without even realizing it's happened. Lithium batteries have a natural self-discharge rate even when they're not being used, so a battery that reads 0% today might drop into what's called a deep discharge state over the following weeks, and that's genuinely dangerous territory for the internal cells. Once a lithium cell drops too low for too long, it can suffer permanent capacity loss, and in some worst case scenarios, the battery management system simply won't allow it to charge again at all, which means you're now shopping for a very expensive replacement instead of just plugging in a charger like you assumed you'd be doing. This mistake happens most often with bikes that get parked seasonally. Somebody rides all summer, tosses the bike in the shed sometime in October, and doesn't think about it again until the following spring, at which point they're understandably confused why the thing that used to get 40 miles of range now struggles to hit half of that. The fix is honestly just a calendar reminder. Check on a stored battery every month or two and give it a top-up charge. If it's dropped too low, it takes maybe 10 minutes, and it could save you hundreds of dollars down the road. I genuinely recommend setting a recurring phone reminder for this specifically, because I'll remember to check it is exactly the kind of promise we all break by the second week of a long winter. Number 8, charging your battery in freezing temperatures. This is one of those mistakes that feels harmless because the charger still lights up and does its thing. Everything looks normal on the surface. But what's happening chemically inside a cold battery during charging is genuinely not good news. Lithium-ion cells struggle to accept charge properly below around freezing, and forcing a charge into cold cells can cause something called lithium plating, where metallic lithium builds up on the internal electrodes instead of being absorbed properly. A process that happens invisibly inside the pack while everything on the outside looks completely normal. Over time, this plating reduces capacity and, in more extreme or repeated cases, can actually create safety risks inside the pack itself, which is not a sentence I like typing out, but it's the honest truth. The fix here is simple but requires a little patience. Bring the battery indoors to a reasonably warm space, let it acclimate for an hour or two before you even think about plugging it in. Yes, even if that means your ride gets pushed back, your battery's long-term health is worth more than an hour of your morning. A lot of riders in colder climates now keep a dedicated indoor spot just for this purpose, and honestly, if you live somewhere with real winters, that's a genuinely smart habit to build into your routine. Some riders get a little impatient and try to speed up the process with a hairdryer or a space heater aimed directly at the pack, and I gently suggest not doing that. Slow and steady room temperature acclimation is genuinely the safer route here. Number 7. Using a cheap third-party charger instead of the one that came with your bike. Look, I get it. You lost the original charger or you wanted a spare for convenience, and there's a version on some marketplace website for a fraction of the price of an official replacement. The problem is that battery chargers are not universally interchangeable the way a phone charger basically is these days. Voltage output, amperage, and the charging curve itself all need to match what your specific battery management system expects to see. And even a slight mismatch in any one of those numbers can cause problems that don't show up immediately, but absolutely add up over time. A mismatched charger can either undercharge your battery consistently, leaving you with less range than you paid for, or in worse cases, actually push more current than the cells are rated to handle safely. I've seen forum posts from riders whose off-brand chargers straight up damage their battery within a handful of uses, and replacing a pack because you tried to save $40 on a charger is about as backwards as it gets. It's a little like buying a cheap knockoff phone charger and being surprised when it fries your battery health after a few months of daily use. If you absolutely need a replacement charger, at minimum go through the original manufacturer or a retailer that explicitly lists compatibility with your specific model. Don't just trust a product photo that looks similar. Connectors alone can be deceiving since plenty of chargers fit the port perfectly while delivering completely wrong electrical specs behind the scenes. Number 6, riding hard in cold weather without letting the battery warm up first. Cold weather doesn't just affect charging, it affects performance and battery health while you're actually out riding too. And this is a mistake almost every rider makes at least once without realizing what's happening. When you pull a cold battery straight out of a cold garage and immediately demand full power output from it, climbing hills, hitting top speed, really leaning on the throttle, you're asking cells that haven't warmed up yet to deliver performance they're chemically not ready for. This can cause voltage sag, reduced range that feels way worse than it should, and over repeated instances, accelerated wear on the internal chemistry of the pack, kind of like repeatedly redlining a car engine before the oils even had a chance to properly circulate. A lot of riders in colder regions have started keeping their battery indoors overnight and only attaching it to the bike right before they head out, giving it a chance to sit closer to room temperature rather than freezing in an unheated garage all night. And some even keep an insulated bag or cover handy for genuinely cold rides, so the battery holds onto that warmth a little longer once it's mounted. It sounds like a small thing, but the difference in both range and long-term battery health is honestly noticeable if you actually pay attention to it. Think of it a little like warming up a car engine on a freezing morning. Nobody expects it to perform at its best the second you turn the key, and a battery pack genuinely deserves that same patience. Number 5, leaving your battery in a hot car or in direct sunlight. This one is the summer equivalent of the cold weather mistakes we just covered. And honestly, it might be even more damaging because heat is generally worse for lithium chemistry than cold is in most situations. A battery left sitting in a parked car on a sunny day can experience internal temperatures well above what the manufacturer ever intended, sometimes climbing past levels that start meaningfully shortening the lifespan of the cells within just a single afternoon. And remember, a car interior on a sunny day regularly climbs well past what most people would guess just from standing outside it. Direct sunlight on a battery that's mounted to a bike parked outside does something very similar, especially if that battery has a dark-colored casing that soaks up heat like it's trying to win an award for it. The safest habit here is simply removing the battery when you're not actively using the bike and storing it somewhere cool and shaded, a closet, a basement. Honestly, even just the inside of your house beats a hot car every single time, and none of those spots require any special equipment, just a little bit of consistency. I know it's an extra step, and I know pulling the battery on and off gets old fast, but this is genuinely one of the cheapest ways to protect a very expensive component. I learned this one the hard way after leaving a battery on my bike rack in a parking lot for an entire August afternoon, and the range drop I noticed on the ride home was honestly enough to convince me never to do that again. Number 4, charging your battery to 100% every single night out of habit. This mistake is sneaky because it feels like the responsible thing to do. Always have a full battery ready to go. Never get caught with low range unexpectedly. But constantly charging to a full 100%, especially when you don't actually need that much range for your typical ride, puts more cumulative stress on the cells than charging to somewhere around 80 or 90% for regular daily use. Most modern e-bike systems and even some phone-connected apps now let you set a charge limit specifically for this reason. And if your bike has that feature, genuinely consider using it, unless you know you need the full range that specific day. It's a setting most owners never even open their app to look for, buried 3 menus deep where nobody thinks to check. Save the full 100% charges for days when you actually plan a longer ride, and let your everyday charging habit sit a little lower on the scale. The same way you probably wouldn't fill your car's gas tank to the absolute brim every single day if you only drove 10 minutes to work. It's a small mental shift, but batteries that live their life bouncing between 20 and 80% consistently tend to last meaningfully longer than ones that get slammed to full capacity every single night without exception. This is genuinely the same logic that's been floating around the electric car world for years now, and it turns out the exact same chemistry applies whether your battery is powering a truck or a bicycle. Number 3, storing the bike in an unheated garage or shed all winter long. This mistake combines a couple of the earlier ones into one long-term storage problem, and it's probably the reason so many riders pull their bike out in spring only to discover the range isn't what it used to be. Unheated storage spaces swing through a huge range of temperatures over the course of a winter, freezing overnight, warming up during a sunny afternoon, freezing again the next night. And that constant temperature cycling is genuinely rough on battery chemistry over an extended period, far rougher than just sitting at one consistent cold temperature the whole time would actually be. If at all possible, bring the battery indoors for the winter months. Even if the bike itself has to stay in the garage or shed, the battery is the expensive, sensitive part. The frame and wheels can handle the cold just fine. They've been dealing with rough weather since bicycles were invented, and they're not about to start complaining now. I know this sounds like a hassle if you've got a heavy battery or an awkward mounting system, but compared to the cost of a replacement pack, carrying it inside a few times a season is honestly nothing. Combine this with the storage charge percentage we talked about earlier, and honestly, you're already covering two of the biggest long-term threats to your battery's lifespan with one simple habit. Number 2, ignoring swelling, punctures, or visible damage on the battery casing. This one isn't really about temperature or charging habits. It's about basic vigilance, and it's shocking how many riders will notice something looks slightly off with their battery and just decide to keep using it anyway because it still technically powers the bike. A swollen battery casing is one of the clearest warning signs in the entire lithium battery world. It means gas buildup is happening inside the cells, and that is not something you want to be riding around with strapped to your frame. Punctures, cracks, or any exposed wiring are equally serious, and continuing to charge or ride with visible damage genuinely raises the risk of a much bigger problem than reduced range or shortened lifespan. This is genuinely the one mistake on this entire list where hesitating and getting it checked out costs you nothing but a little inconvenience. If you ever notice swelling, unusual heat, a strange smell, or physical damage to your battery, the correct move is to stop using it immediately and have it inspected or replaced by a professional, not to just keep riding and hope for the best. I know a new battery is expensive and nobody wants to hear that, but it's a whole lot cheaper than the alternative outcomes here. A quick monthly visual check, just glancing over the casing for bulging cracks or anything that looks even slightly different from normal, takes about 30 seconds and could genuinely be the difference between catching a problem early and dealing with something much worse later. Number 1, power washing or spraying water directly at the battery and its connectors. And here we are at number 1, a mistake that feels completely reasonable in the moment and yet causes an enormous number of battery failures in every single year across the entire industry. You just finished a muddy ride, the bike is filthy, and a pressure washer feels like the fastest, most satisfying way to get it clean again, except that high-pressure water finds its way into seams, connectors, and vents that were never designed to handle that kind of direct force. Most e-bike batteries carry some level of water resistance rating for rain and splashes, but that rating almost never accounts for the concentrated pressure of a garden hose nozzle or a power washer aimed directly at the pack. There's a genuinely big difference between surviving a rainy commute and surviving a jet of water blasted at close range for 30 seconds straight. Water intrusion into a battery connector can cause corrosion, intermittent connection issues, or in worse cases, short circuits that show up weeks later seemingly out of nowhere, long after you've forgotten about that one aggressive cleaning session. The fix is simple. Use a soft cloth, a bucket of soapy water, and a gentle hand for anything near the battery and its connectors, and save the power washer for the frame and tires where it genuinely belongs. If you really want that showroom clean, look after a muddy ride, cover the battery and connector port with a plastic bag, or a dedicated splash cover before you bring out the hose. It takes 10 extra seconds, and it genuinely eliminates this entire problem. So there you have it, 11 mistakes that are quietly shortening the life of e-bike batteries everywhere, and the honestly frustrating part is that almost none of them are obvious until you already know about them. What strikes me most about this entire list is how many of these mistakes come from good intentions, riders trying to keep their battery topped off, trying to clean their bike properly, trying to protect their investment, and accidentally doing the exact opposite in the process without ever meaning to cause any harm at all. The good news is that none of these fixes require any special tools or technical knowledge. It's mostly just building a handful of better habits around charging timing, storage temperature, and basic vigilance for physical damage. The kind of small adjustments that take about a week to feel automatic once you actually commit to them. A battery replacement can easily run you several $100s depending on your specific bike, so a little bit of discipline now genuinely pays for itself many times over across the life of the pack, and honestly, the riders who take these habits seriously tend to squeeze years of extra life out of a pack that others would have replaced long before it was actually necessary. If you've made one of these mistakes yourself, don't feel too bad about it. I've personally made at least 4 of the 11 on this list before I actually learned better, and I'd bet most riders watching this video have made a few too. Which one of these caught you off guard the most? Let us know down in the comments, and while you're there, let us know if there's a mistake we somehow missed, because I guarantee some of you have battery horror stories that would make this entire list look tame by comparison. If you found this genuinely useful, go ahead and hit subscribe, because we're covering more practical ownership advice like this every single week, and trust me, your battery and your wallet will thank you for it.